Thanks for joining us first thing this morning. It's a nice packed house. Everyone's kind of tucked in here nicely. My name's John Vinsel. I am the PM lead for MSIX. With me is...
Hi guys, I'm Nona Sirakova. I work with John on MSIX, the end-to-end pipeline and app installer updates.
Cool. So we're here to just kind of give you an overview of MSIX, kind of go tell you all the foundations of it, where we're kind of heading with it, and how it applies to you guys in your enterprises. So when we think about MSIX, really the foundations of everything we're trying to do is think about never regret installing an app. I think everyone in this audience here has probably gone to some website, installed an application, it slowed down your PC, and then you try to uninstall it, and there's just junk left behind. And over time, you're just like, darn it, I just got to go re-image my PC and start that thing all over again. So when we think about MSIX, obviously we're trying to get away from that, we're trying to get away from that regretting installing an app. So we built the foundations on, a lot of things that we look at for existing apps. So, one, the pipeline will always make sure that you're up to date. So MSIX itself will have a bunch of auto-updating capabilities so that, the app itself doesn't have to write its own auto-updater. We want to reuse existing assets. Many times in the past, we talked about, hey, here's a way you can do this with a different deployment technology, but you have to go change your code or start over from scratch. We tried that, it didn't work, got a lot of feedback. So really we want to embrace of, hey, I have files that I might not be able to touch. How can I just take advantage of the new deployment or the new installer tech without having to go recode my application? We want to be able to protect your data. We want to make sure that you as the user are safe and people can't damage your system and do things like that. And also provide security and reliability. And we want to make sure that malware can't be attacking your applications. And then just the core of MSIX is really simplifying the app deployment experience, right? Make it a fast, simple, reliable deployment of your application. So when we sit there and we talk to enterprises and enterprises IT, we really look at enterprise IT wanting to move to modern. And Win 10 has been this catalyst to move to modern. Most folks are on Windows 7. You're just upgrading to Windows 10, looking at it like it's Windows 7, which is great. And then once you start getting Windows 10 deployed, you're like, hey, how can I just simplify my IT in general, right? How can I simplify user management? How can I simplify security? Most importantly, how can I simplify app deployment? And app packaging is fundamental to all of enterprise IT. The way we do app packaging today is really from the XP era, if you really think about it, right? I might have repackaged an app, or I take the app, I repackage it, I deploy it, I do it once every time I get a new OS or a new version of the app. The packaging is done by the IT pro, not necessarily by the developer. It's either MSI or AppV, but really, it's really just MSI or custom scripting when you think about it. I talked to my friends over on the SCCM team. I think they said pretty much 98% of all apps are either an MSI or a script wrapping, a setup.exe type installer. And then really repackaging isn't just for your own apps. It's you take off-the-shelf apps that might not really work well in your enterprise and then do a whole bunch of custom scripting to make them work in your enterprise. And from our side, we really haven't done much to address packaging and deployment for things like MSI in about a decade, really since the AppV 3.0 timeframe. So really what I'll talk about mostly today is how to modernize our IT packaging and basically involve the installer to make it simpler and easier for everyone to use in their enterprise. So if we look at the modern application lifecycle today, a developer makes an application, they create it in Visual Studio, they might ship it via their own website, they might redist it to you. If it's an internal LOB app, obviously they pass it over. In most cases, the developer builds this MSI and they think it works great, but in reality it doesn't. So then the IT pro takes that, they might reconfigure it and do some customizations. They might just fix the installer so it works within their enterprise. They repackage it to MSI or AppV using any of the custom installers that are out there today. And then they deploy it with System Center Configuration Manager or Intune. But they have to go and repackage these apps every single update and every single OS upgrade. So app update or OS upgrade. And that leads us into this concept that we call packaging paralysis. Again, this is something we're really trying to help people get away from and find a way to make it easier to manage and deploy apps within your enterprise. So as I talk about it, it's like, you acquire the app from the developer. Again, you might need to go customize this. So maybe you you're going to go add like a custom server name into it, or you're going to do custom branding for your enterprise. So every time you do this, it costs you a bit of money and a bit of time. Sometimes you might have SLAs out there that it's like 2 to 3 weeks to repackage an app. Well, it's kind of crazy if you want to get a new version out to your users. You have to either send it to your packaging team, maybe you outsource that. And if it's taking 2 to 3 weeks plus the rollout of your deployment, it's like 6 to 8 weeks before you get your app deployed. And then you get a new version of the OS, and then you got to do that. So all your apps have to get repackaged to make sure they work with an OS. And in an era where you want Windows 10 to deploy faster, you really don't want to do that. And then this cycle just continued to go over and over and over again. And it gets us into this, what we call, cycle of fail, or, packaging paralysis. So where we really want to move to is we want to move to an era where the OS can easily update on its own. The apps can easily update on their own. And if you have customizations, you can easily go and manage and deploy those customizations without having to go and repackage applications. So this way, in a world where you want to potentially take Windows updates at a faster cadence, you're not thinking about, oh, I have to repackage my app for Windows. And if you're doing a bunch of branding and customization to your enterprise apps, you can do it independently of taking the ISVs or your developers' apps and going and repackaging it. So we'll talk about these concepts throughout this session, and we'll show some demos of how this will work today with MSIX. Okay, so I showed the first life cycle. So once we go to that virtuous cycle, this is really the model that we want to be in. It's the app developer creates the app. We're working with a bunch of ISVs to go and update their apps to MSIX. And then once we hit the IT pro side of the world, you guys will get out of the business of repackaging MSIX. It won't be completely out of it because there'll be some older legacy apps that you might still need to move over. But ideally, you want to move to a world where the developer's providing this package. And we'll talk a little bit about the developer side, but mostly there's a whole nother session dedicated to developer. I think it's at 12:30 today. I have it at the end of the deck. Then I'll dive into the approach we're taking for the developers on MSIX to also help them make their life easier. Okay, so that's kind of the approach of how we want to take and how we're looking at it. But really, how do I move forward and get to this, modern IT, or really to MSIX? So, I'm sure everyone's using one, if not many of these technologies. We spend a lot of time with enterprise customers really like, hey, what are the installers that you use? What do you really like about these installers? What do you not like about these installers? And how can we actually evolve these installers to be a better technology moving forward? And when we think about it, MSIX is kind of like a superset of all these technologies, but not truly a superset because we're trying not to bring forward the things that were bad in each one of those technologies. So we took the learnings from the existing installers we had, like, hey, I want to be able to easily update, from my own servers with click once, but I want to have, the WinWat promise of AppV, but I want to make it install anywhere like an MSI. And really, we evolved those deployment technologies to be what is MSIX. So let me go through and just kind of talk about the benefits of MSIX and why it's a better way to do things, but more importantly, how it'll also help you in your enterprise and deploying to your users. So I talked about never regret installing an app. Really, that means we offer a predictable, safe, reliable deployment. Everything in our package is declarative and manifest driven, so there's not things like custom actions that kind of spawn off into the system and leave rot around. But furthermore, we also have a bunch of our own updating, and we manage the whole life cycle of the installation and uninstallation, which some of the other techs didn't do, so people had to go write custom code to kind of help with that. We offer a clean uninstall. We do some lightweight registry and file system virtualization, so when the app is laid down, we know exactly everything that the app needs, where it's writing to, and really when it's being removed, it's as simple as just a delete. So it really is this clean uninstall. So if I have a PC and I deploy 5 MSIs to it, and then I have that same PC and those apps are 5, or a different PC and those apps are 5 MSIXs, if I go and remove the apps from both of those devices, the one with MSIX is exactly the same as before I started deploying apps. The one with MSIs still has some junk left behind. Hopefully not too much if they wrote a good installer, but we all know from installing apps over time, there's a lot left behind. So we offer this clean uninstall, which is one of the key and pivotal things to why MSIX is important. Disk space optimization. When it comes to enterprises, this is probably one of the most unknown features and probably one of the most important features that you'll actually see for when you're deploying apps. First off, we single instance store all the files on the disk. So if you're building line of business apps and those apps are sharing files, we'll only store that file once on disk and we'll link it over to all the other apps. So we're really reducing the footprint that's taken up over the network. So as companies might be moving to some lower cost devices or just in general, the disks are filling up, we're being super smart about how we go and store those files on the disk. And since MSIX is user-based, while it is user-based and the apps are registered per user, again, we only use the files once on disk. So we store them all in a folder called Windows Apps, and then we just link and echo those files out to the users as they're entitled to those applications. So the operating system really knows everything that's going on with the apps and the files, and it's doing a whole bunch of smarts in the system to reduce and minimize what's on disk. Network optimization. This is another thing that's really key and important in an enterprise. Not only do we single instance the files on disk, we optimize over the network. So I talked about if I'm reusing a DLL across two apps, I won't store it twice on disk. But that second app that needs that DLL, if you're installing that app, I will know that that DLL is already there, and I won't even pull that down over the wire. So we're being really smart about what we're downloading over the network. We'll also, in the case of an update of an app, we download only the blocks that have changed. So if you have a file that just has a little bit of a security update to it, and maybe it's a 5 meg file, and maybe only 100K has changed, in 64K chunks, we'll just download those changes. We won't read down the entire file, or with MSI, you used to have to download the whole MSI and then install it, and only a few files would change. So we're being really smart about what we're doing over the network, really minimizing the impact to networks, especially as enterprises are kind of going to this cloud-based management. It's like, hey, now I have to really worry about network because everything's going outside to the cloud. How can I be smarter and better about these types of things? Okay, I talked a little bit about the simpler packaging and deployment. Really, this is, again, we're as simple as a zip file with an extract, and then a manifest tells the operating system everything to go do. Now, I kind of oversimplify it when I say it that way, but really what I'm trying to illustrate is this declarative install, and we're not doing all these complex things that we used to do with things like MSI. So we manage the folders that you go and install in, we extract the files out. In the case of updates, we're linking files over and minimizing even the downloads and storing of files. And then everything that the app needs to do is declarative in the manifest. So if you need to register file type associations, those are already in there. If you want to add new protocol activations, those are all in there. So we know everything that the app needs to go do, and we can actually go set that up from our manifest. We also offer a great identity system. So in the world of MSI, it was pretty good. There was GUIDs out there, but I worked in an enterprise before I came to Microsoft, and the folks on my team that did packaging did a really, really good job most of the time. Every so often, though, they forgot to change the GUID on an update. So then we go push an update, and it would say, oh, this version's already there, even though it was a newer version of the app. So the way we go in, version our app is we actually have a hard-coded version field, not just a GUID. So usually people are versioning correctly. And then we combine that with the app name and the publisher. And then to further enhance security, the identity is all tied to your signing certificate so that you'll never get conflicts across multiple people building similar types of apps with names and everything. So we have a really good identity and versioning system, and then that's all backed by signing. So when you're doing these things like updates, as long as you're just bumping the version, which generally people do that one at least, we'll know what's going on the device, and we can easily go and build and deploy and manage those updates to the apps. Okay, I talked a lot about this already. The OS manages all the updates, installs, and removals. Again, you don't really have to do any custom code here. We do it all for you. We also, all the apps are installed per user. Now, I know a few folks are thinking in here, okay, per user is great, and I kind of want to move to that. But what about things like kiosks? What about things like lab PCs? Don't worry, we actually do have a way we call provisioning to go and install an app that any user of the box logs on. It's still installed per user, but Windows will identify any new user and then just auto-install it per that user. So we have per user installs, but you still have a way to kind of do a device-based install, but still operates at a per user level. And then all the app state is stored per user again. So you don't actually get app data leaking across users or anything like that. And then lastly, Windows provides integrity for the app and tamper protection. Again, I talked a little bit about signing. One of the things we do require in MSIX is signing. Signing is actually really important in an enterprise, or really for any app. I was talking to this customer, might have been about 6-8 months ago, and they had this application, and the application was something they got from a vendor, and it wasn't signed, and they'd got this app multiple times before, and it integrated with their CRM system. Well, they deployed the app, the code wasn't signed, and someone actually had targeted them and attacked them, and basically took over their app and their CRM system for ransomware. And because the code wasn't signed, they could go and take over, and there was no enforcement to make sure the bits weren't tampered. And ultimately, this company was down for a couple weeks, lost a bunch of data. We prevent that from happening by ensuring that there's signing in place, and then the MSIX deployment platform continually evaluates the app to make sure no tampering has happened. So that's that level of security I was kind of talking about a little bit earlier. And it's really important because in a world where we never want to get another WannaCry on our devices, we want to enforce some level of security there. And just by signing a package, we can offer that level of security to you. And then again, on top of all of that, from an administrator perspective, even though the packages are signed, obviously, people can sign bad packages. An IT pro can restrict the level of apps and the signing sources that they come from. So I think there's another session this week from the security team on Device Guard. Things like Device Guard allow you to limit the signing sources. So if you want to really protect your environment, you can ratchet that down. But more importantly, just trust in the OS will limit a lot of the bad actors from playing on your system. Okay, so next off, I just want to transition and kind of talk a little bit about what MSIX is and what the file looks like. So if we look at the MSIX file deconstructed, it's not much different than what you have today. It's your package payload, so it's your entire application. And then we have a few footprint files that we put in there, and that's how we go and manage the update and installation of the application. Everything that you need is all in one file, so it's super easy, super portable to pass around. And then what that looks like, again, is we have the application files. We have our app manifest. The app manifest is basically the instruction set of what the installer needs to do, combined with a bunch of identity stuff. We have the block map. The block map I talked a little bit about earlier, and that's a hash of all the files in the application. That's what we use to, one, make sure that the files aren't tampered when they're put down on disk. But more importantly, that's how we do our single instance storing and all those network optimizations. Because we know the files in every package, and we have a little SQLite database on the device, we know everything that's kind of going on there. So I should click my slides. There's the app signature in there. Again, that's basically ensuring that we have the trust. So it's information about the code signing that's going on there. Block map and signature, okay. And then again, we just go ahead and install an update and do the removal. So from an overhead perspective, there's not too much. And then again, all this is really just a zip file. If you rename an MSIX to .zip, you can just crack it open and explore it and see everything that's kind of in there. So I talked a little bit about all the stuff we're doing with the block map. So I wanted to visually kind of walk through how that works. I talked about we have the block map. We have the ability to be smarter about things going over the wire. So say I have a PC and I have an app. The first time I go and install that application, the package is installed on the local machine for the first time. The blocks are all laid down and registered on disk. So this is the first app I'm installing, the first time anything's being deployed there. And then I get a new version of the app. This is where the really cool stuff kind of kicks in, because now when I get the new version of the application, we detect that only the update blocks that have changed are going to come down. So I'm not re-downloading the entire package. I don't have to cache everything onto the device and then install it locally. I can do all this over the network. I can do it from a website. I can do it from SCCM. I can do it from the store. And then in the deployment platform, we go and we hard link over all the existing files, and then we combine the Delta source with the original file to make the new file. And we're doing all of this while the user can actually still use their original app. So in the world of an MSI or a setup.exe, when I go and do an update, the first thing it says is, turn off your app. Well, now I can go and actually stage all the bits, side by side on the device, and the user can keep working. And then I can either, well, one, force the user to turn off the app, or I can just silently wait until the user's done with the app. And as soon as the user shuts off the app, we'll go register the new one in place, and then we'll, in the background, clean up the old version of the app. So there's just a lot of optimizations, not only for network, for disk footprint, but even user experience to make it a better update experience. And all this is built into the OS platform so that you don't have to go and build your own auto updater that takes up another service, that adds more resource hogging of the PC, or takes memory away, or just kind of intrudes upon the user. Cool. So as you want to transition to MSIX, one of the things that we know are tools are vital. I talked a little bit about earlier, it's like Microsoft really hasn't done anything good since like the AppV3-ish sequencer. So we are building our own tools that are aimed at both IT pro and developers. We did do one tool in the interim that was for developers. It was called the Desktop App Converter. It worked pretty well if you were a dev, but honestly, even the devs were like, I wanted more feature functionality of it because it was really basic. But in addition to all the stuff that we're doing, we're actually working really closely with the entire packaging ecosystem and partners, because we understand that, hey, Microsoft can do some stuff, and honestly, we aren't the forefront drivers of all the end-to-end experiences here. There's a lot of key partners that enable us to do more. So pretty much most of the major partners have all announced that they will be adding support for MSIX in the near future. So if you're using a packaging tool, hopefully it's on this list. If it's not, let me know, because I'll go track them down and get them to add support. And then a handful of them have actually already released support for MSIX. So folks like Advanced Installer, CloudHouse, FireGiant, Flexera, and InstallAware are already shipping at least a beta version of their tool with MSIX support. So we're already seeing the adoption from the tools vendors. So as 1809 rolls out, it has the base support for MSIX. There's tooling to go match that, and it's available for you guys today. So that brings us to our tool. We do have the MSIX packaging tool, which is a free download from the Microsoft Store. You can get it directly from the Microsoft Store or Store for Business if you're using Azure AD. Likewise, a lot of people might not want to be fully connected to the store. As long as you have an Azure AD tenant for the Store for Business, you can go and download the tool, and then you can just redistribute the MSIX within your environment, so you don't actually have to have all the PCs connected to the store to go get that. And then furthermore, after 1809 ships, we will be shipping a Quick Create VM. So anyone that's been in Hypervisor, and you say, oh, I want to create a new virtual PC, there's a new option that came a couple releases ago called the Quick Create VM. You might see a developer image there. We're actually going to create MSIX packaging tool ready VM that we're going to ship there. So if you just wanted to go and play with it and you didn't want to set up a whole PC, that'll come down with all the base requirements, drivers, and everything that you need to get going on it. We're targeting release of our tool. Right now it's in preview. You can download it, play with it today. We're targeting release for the tool in October of 2018, so it's coming really, really quick here. I was hoping to launch it by Ignite, but we really want the platform to be done and make sure there's no bugs in the platform, and then make sure the tool aligns with that. And then we're going to keep updating the tool. The cool thing about the tool and why we put it in the store is we can add more features outside of the Windows release cycle. So in the past, we used to put stuff in the ADK, and then we were tied to a new Windows release cycle to get you guys new features. Right now, we're thinking we're going to ship every 3 months at least a feature update, and then depending on bug updates, we can be more agile in shipping those out as well, and we can just offer more and more to what customers want for the apps. And then, like I said, frequent updates based on user feedback. So, filing stuff in Feedback Hub, letting us know what you guys want. Every Feedback Hub item comes to me, well, me or someone on my team. So we're listening, and we just want to make our tools the best things for you guys. With that said, you guys are probably sick of me talking. Let's see some actual demos in action. So Nona's going to show you how just the packaging tool and how easy it is.
Cool. Thanks, John. So as you heard from John, the MSIX packaging tool is an easy way for enterprises to switch over to MSIX and take advantage of all it has to offer. And as you can see here, we've got the packaging tool in the store, and I'll show you exactly how apps get converted. I already have the packaging tool installed on my device, so I just open it here. So let's say we have the Contoso team, and the Contoso team uses the HeadTracks application as their HR app. They count how many folks they have on their team, how many open head counts, things like that. Now, the HeadTracks app for them is an MSI, and they want to be able to convert it to MSIX easily. So we'll use the packaging tool to do the conversion. Now, as you see on the first screen, I have two options, application package or modification package. In some of our later talks, we're going to cover modification packages, which are essentially plugins. Here we're going to cover the actual main package. So all I really need is to just go get my MSI. And I don't need, sorry about that, I don't need my source code. All I need is the actual MSI. Next, I need to provide a certificate. So signing your application, as John mentioned, is very important. It ensures that no one can impersonate you. It ensures that you can effectively protect your users from installing just anything, like they tend to just click on anything that they're told to click on. And to help you guys with signing, we've actually made it very easy to get certificates. We provide our own first-party services that provide you with certificates, like Visual Studio App Center or DGSS, and you can get your certificates there. For us, our Contoso team already has a certificate, and it's always good to protect your certificate with a password. So I pasted mine in here. All right. Next, we provide a set of steps that provide best practices when installing your application. Now, for me, I'm already running in a VM, so here I won't choose the virtual machine. I'll choose this computer. On this page, we have a bunch of metadata from the application. A lot of this metadata is actually queried from the MSI, and the remainder, like the publisher name and the publisher display name, come from the certificate. So if you wanted to change something that your users would see about your application's metadata, here would be the time to do that. Finally, I get some suggestions on things running on my machine that might interfere with my conversion. Now, the reason I get these suggestions is because once the conversion begins, we listen to everything happening on the machine. So if any of the services listed here are actually necessary for your conversion, feel free to keep them. If not, which in my case is the case, I'll go ahead and disable them. Once those services are disabled, I'll be free to continue with my conversion. All right, that was fast. So now I'll really just go through the Win32 installation of my app, and in that process, we're capturing everything that's happening and porting that into MSIX.
So what's cool about this is she went through the wizard and clicked on all the UX, but if you saw on the first page, there's a place you can offer additional command line arguments. So if you just want to do a silent install through the UX, you could go do that. If you need special parameters during your install, you can go and do that. And then in a session on Thursday, Charlotte from my team and Avi from the SCCM team are talking about taking apps from ConfigMan and moving them to MSIX, and they walk through some command line options. So there's lots of different ways to go convert. This is just the most visual appealing way because we get to show lots of UX off.
Yep. So on my next page, I'm actually allowed to use additional shortcuts if there are any for my application so they can get captured in the conversion as well. My application is pretty simple and I don't have any of those, so I can just click through. And we've actually gotten started with our conversion. All right. Next, I'll just select where I want my application to get created. And I have successfully created my first MSIX package. Now let's see the actual package. As you can see, we have our shiny new MSIX package, our new version of HeadTracks. And this is how easy it is to convert a package. As you saw, it literally took just a couple minutes for me to click through and get the conversion going. And with that, I'll hand it back over to John.
Cool. And what's really cool about this, we didn't really talk too much about it, they'll talk more about it Thursday, is you might see another file in the output folder. It's an XML. It's basically when you walk through the wizard the first time, we created a template so that if you ever need to repackage that app a second time, maybe you're still deploying to Windows 7 right now and you have an MSI and you want to have MSIX for Windows 10, you can use this template to feed it into the command line interface and then just automate any kind of conversions moving forward. Cool. That was great, Noah. Thanks. So the MSIX packaging tool is aimed for IT pros. Again, it allows the migration of any installer that you guys have out there. If you're using Windows Installer MSI, if you're using AppV, setup.exe, script-based, click once. And really, when we say script-based, that means you can really do anything. You can manually walk through and copy files and do whatever you want. So hopefully all the installer text you're using there are on the migration list. If they're not, please let me know. We'll get it added to our backlog and get support for that shortly. And then I'm going to dive into customization a little bit. But the packaging tool lets us get in the ability to go and create these modification packages that allow us to deploy plugins or any of the customization that we want to do. And I'll dive a little bit deeper into that in a couple slides. So one of the other things that kind of comes up that I won't talk too much about in this session, it's really more for the developer session. When we go and package apps or even move them forward, every so often things don't quite work the way they should be. And in the past, we used to say, hey, developers, go change your code and then repackage your app. When we started aiming this towards IT pros, we needed a way to provide some sort of mechanism to make these apps work in a new, changed, modern world without taking those code changes. And that's something that we've introduced called the package support framework. So while we're actually updating these applications or running them through a conversion tool, we can add basically modules that will help the app behave better in a new world, right? So one of the common things that kind of comes up is, hey, I built this app 10, 12 years ago, and the app wrote to the install folder. Now, that's never really been a good practice, and apps shouldn't have been doing that. Once we go and move the apps into our Windows apps and we manage the full state of the app, if they try to write to the install folder, it won't work. So what we allow the package support framework to do is it builds on a concept called Windows Detours. Windows Detours is now open source, but it allows us to basically intercept calls and redirect them. So, hey, if your app is writing to the current install directory, just add a package support framework and the app will behave properly. And the package support framework is something that's open source that we're allowing the community to kind of go and contribute to, but it's also beyond what you can do in containerization, right? So while we virtualize the file system in the registry, there might be other things that you might want to take advantage of as you're changing your infrastructure. Like one of the examples me and my boss always kind of chat about is, hey, we should get someone to go build a package support framework that converts NTLM to AAD auth. You might have an app that even if it's MSI works great today. As you want to go shut down all your on-prem AD and move to more of a cloud-based Azure AD, you won't have any NTLM anymore. So that app will just break. So how do I go and fix those types of things? So this is something that I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about and let you know that for apps that don't behave correctly, there is a way to go remediate them. From our packaging tool side, we're going to start integrating the ability to pull in support frameworks in one of our upcoming releases, and I believe some of the tools vendors are doing that as well. And then we're going to keep contributing to that. It being open source and in GitHub, we can add things as we find them, and we don't have to wait for a Windows release cycle to go and update those. And then there's that session Wednesday, which is today at 12:30, and Andrew, my group manager, he'll be covering a bunch of the dev side of this, and he'll deep dive into a lot more of how the package support framework works. So we talked a little bit about distribution, but like I talked about in the past, depending on the install technology you used, we might have limited what you can do with that. So when we think about MSIX, we can easily distribute MSIX from the store for business. We think it's a great place to go because guess what? You don't have to worry about the hosting. You get auto updates via Windows Update. It really minimizes what you have to do in your enterprise. But that's not for everyone. So, obviously we'll support Microsoft Intune. So if you're using Intune, you can pull your MSIXs in. I believe the support for MSIX is coming in 1809 release. So if it's not already there, it's coming really shortly. But, people are still using Configuration Manager. That support was added in 1806. So Configuration Manager supports MSIX natively. But more importantly, above all else, just distribute wherever you need to. MSIX isn't locked to a Windows edition or to a certain management tool. If you want to host from a website, host from a website. If you want to leave your files on a UNC share, leave them on a UNC share. You can do whatever you want like you could with a setup.exe or an MSI. We just want to make sure that we can update your installers and move you to a better thing and not put any restrictions in place. So with that being said, I think demos are always better, so let's have Nona kind of show you how easy it is to just install an app off a website.
Alrighty. So we're all familiar with the standard install where I, as a user, click a button, and then my application gets downloaded onto my device, and then I have to go install it. If I'm unlucky enough to click Save As, it goes in my Downloads folder, and it's literally there to die. No one ever deletes anything in there. So we're all familiar with that one. And let's take a look at what we brought you guys now. So we brought you a way to be able to install straight from the network. In other words, I click on the install button and my install wizard immediately launches. And I get started with the installation directly. So you might ask, what's going on behind the scenes here? Let's take a look at it. As you can see, behind our install button, in addition to our regular href and our path to the MSIX application we're installing, we now have this precursor ms-app installer right here. And that's basically what allows us to get this nice behavior. Now, there's several things I'd like to point out here. One is, if you noticed, I installed in Firefox. This is because this protocol installation is browser agnostic. So you can do it from anywhere. Your users don't have to change anything about their behavior. And the other thing is, to enable this kind of protocol installation, it was that easy. All I had to do is I just had to add the little precursor in front of the regular code that I add, and I'm immediately starting the installation of my application.
Cool. So another couple of things to point out there is that installer is part of Windows. So it's an app that we ship pre-include as part of Windows. So when you call that, we take advantage of all the things that I talked about earlier. Installing over the wire, single instance storing, only downloading the blocks that you use. So it's all built into the OS. It's available for you to use right now. And it's just a super easy way if you want to host things on a website. Or even if I'm double clicking off a UNC, I'd have that same type of experience. Cool. So I talked a little bit about updating of apps. Again, Windows controls the update cycle. And for things coming from like the Windows Store or the Microsoft Store or the Store for Business, all the apps are automatically updated as part of your Windows update cycle. So if you're distributing that way, you don't need to do anything. The OS handles those updates. If you are distributing via your management tools, just remember, Config Man or Intune, IT pros control that, so you have all the fine-grained controls that you want. If you want to go and target or do phase deployments, that's all in the hands of the IT pro. And then if you're doing things like what we just showed you there with installing off a website, we do have a way via an XML file we call the app installer file to go and set some update cadences. And right now you can configure it for silent updates where within like a 24-hour period we'll just periodically check and update in the background. Or you can say, hey, every time the user launches the app, launch it once every 24 hours, we go and check the server for updates. So there's a few different options, even when you're hosting off your own shares, to do auto update functionality without having to go build your own custom installer. Again, you just drop this XML there, you point the user to the app installer file to install, and Windows will take care of the rest of it for you. And then one more thing that I wanted to touch on, a feature that's coming very soon, it's actually available on the platform, it's just not lit up across all the end-to-end tool sets, is the ability to force an update to any version. So one of the things that we've heard a lot from enterprises is every so often I deploy an app and whoops, something breaks. So, in a traditional world, they now have to go and uninstall that app and then go reinstall it. We have the ability to go and force an update to any version. And again, just because I'm going backwards in time on the version, I can still take advantage of all the single instance storing and the differential updates over the wire. It's just an explicit force statement the IT pro has to say I'm okay going backwards on a version. But we're really trying to make the platform robust enough to meet all the different needs that folks need for deploying and installing applications. So I talked a little bit about containers earlier, and a lot of people are like, okay, I get containers, but what does it really mean to me, and how are they kind of different across how I use different apps? So if we look at a Win32 world, on my container continuum, Win32 world just kind of ran wild. It could do whatever it wanted to. It ran full trust, had access to NT-user, GDI, and all that type of stuff. And then in Windows, a little while back, we introduced something like Windows Defender Application Guard, if you guys are familiar with it. That's secure edge browsing. That allows apps to run with an isolated kernel. Now, if you're into security, that is probably the most restrictive set of things you can do, and it's great if you want to be secure. The problem is you take about a 2 gig overhead because you're running a Windows VM to isolate out there. So in between that, in the past, we also had the desktop bridge. Now, the desktop bridge allowed us to go and just do these lightweight file system and registry virtualizations. But you're still a full trust app. You're still, taking all the resources you wanted to. If you installed the app, there was no way of preventing, the app from using the camera, for instance. And then we had this thing called UWP, where I actually had all the richness of resources and capability management, but it was so restrictive, it was really hard to do what I needed to do, and I generally had to rewrite my app to that. Andrew will talk a lot more about this in his session from the developer side, but really with MSIX, we've kind of merged the two containers and created a dial that you guys can kind of adjust. In the dial, take it 1 to 11, right? And if you're on the WDAG side or the Defender Application Guard side, that would be the most secure at 11. If you're out on the lowest end of the MSIX container, it's really a 3. Longer term, we might create a 1 that lets you even remove all the file system and registry virtualization. If you just really have an app compat problem and you're like, that's the last thing creating my barrier to entry. But really, we want to be able to allow you as the IT pro to ratchet up the level of security and the level of containment that you can do within an app. And that's what the container continuum will allow you to do. Some of this is available today in the 1809 version, and we're going to keep adding to the flexibility of containers over the next couple of releases. Okay. So when I showed that slide a little while ago and I had the 3 swim lanes going on, I talked about, hey, we want Windows Update to update from Windows, or Windows to update from Windows Update. We want the apps to update from whatever the app source was, and we want to be able to go and customize and separate that out. So really, we want to be able to decouple these updates from the app. We want to keep code flowing, as we say. We want the enterprise to be in control, or the IT pro to be in control of all these things. And we want to minimize all the things that they need to go and do from their side. So if I'm customizing an app, how can I just create that customization once and not have to do it with every update? So this is where the modification package that I talked about a few slides ago comes into play. So in the world of MSIX, you have your MSIX, which is your default app. And when you launch that, it runs in the MSIX container. But then you can create this thing called a modification package. And you can, you can deploy this modification package down to the user's device. It'll be 2 packages deployed from an IT pro perspective. On disk, if you browse the file system, there'll be 2 packages. But at runtime, it'll be 1 app to the user. The modification will be overlaid with the original app, and it'll create that experience of what you would do when you used to customize your MSI. But it gives me the flexibility and agility to go and manage both of these packages independently and not always have to go and repackage to do my updates. So in a world where I get an update to the HR app, I can just take that update to the HR app. I don't have to go repackage it for the customization. And then if I want to change my modification, I can do that as well. Likewise, if I have customizations for each business unit, I can just create those and not have to have 3 or 4 different versions of the same package because I needed the customization with the app. And then one of the other cool things is if you have the need to have multiple customizations to an app, you can do that. It's a one-to-many. So you can create a Contoso customization pack, and then you can say, we always know the execs are a little special and they need just everything their way. Well, we'll go create an exec customization package. You can deploy all 3, the app, the Contoso, and the exec customization package to the device. When the app is launched, they'll all merge. It'll run like it's one seamless app. And you as the IT pro can also set the prioritization of any of the merge conflicts. So you can say, hey, I want the exec to be the final state if Contoso says make it restrictive and the exec says, hey, I want this setting to open up everything. So lots of flexibility on how you can go build and deploy these packages. So that said, let's jump over and actually show you a demo live of a modification package.
All right. So you saw me creating the MSIX for Contoso's HR app. So let's start out by installing it first and check out what Contoso's HeadTracks app has to offer. So after the installation, the application gets launched. And as you can see, it's a pretty useful app, except it's difficult to navigate. To find anyone, it looks like I have to scroll through all the users. It's not a good use case. So my IT pro finds out that there's a modification package for this application. Now, if there were a Win32 plugin, my IT pro could use the MSIX packaging tool to convert it to MSIX. In my case, it's already pre-converted. So I'll show it to you guys already in MSIX format. Now, as an IT pro, you would push these updates to your users automatically. For the demo purposes, for things to go faster, I'll just have them locally and apply them. So I install my modification package. And once it gets installed, this is all I had to do to get it to work. Now, the moment I go to launch my HeadTracks app, look at this. We've got this awesome search functionality that now we can use to search for the folks we're trying to find. But we actually need even more functionality. So later on, there's another update to the main application that comes in. And so that gets pushed to us as well. And here I have version 2 of my HeadTracks application that gets pushed to me. And you'll see that once the update gets applied and I launch my application, it's version 2 has some additional menus here, but also notice that version 2 kept its usage of the modification package. The modification package is still here, and my IT pro didn't have to do anything extra to get it to work, didn't have to repackage it, didn't have to push an extra one to me. It's just there. Now let's take a look at what that modification package shows up as in my apps and features. I'll navigate to my HeadTracks app. And if you notice, the modification package is under here under add-ons, and I can actually install and uninstall it independently of the version of the application that I've got running. So I can just go and uninstall, and after the uninstallation is complete, I can still launch my application and it'll still be version 2. Nothing is going to break with my application. In fact, let's show it. The only thing that will be different is that I don't have the search functionality anymore. So this really reinforces the point that John was making about keeping your code flowing and allowing you to be able to modify your application the way you need without needing to repackage everything over and over. And this makes it easier for both you and your users to distribute and update your applications. And with that, I'll switch back over to John.
Cool. So what else is really important about how we've done the modification packages is when I go and send that customization down, like I said, it's completely separate from the app. So I'm not trampling registry entries, I'm not replacing files. At launch, I'm overlaying these things, right? So again, when I remove any customization or plugins or things like that, I'm back to that original state the app was in. So it's a great way if, maybe if you're doing it with plugins and it's causing problems to the app, you can guarantee that app was back to its original state. So it just adds a little bit more reliability. And again, I talked earlier about, when you're installing MSIs, the state of the PC might not be the same. You can always get back to a known state with MSIX. It's, like I said, it's overlaid, and if you have many modification packages, as soon as you remove those, only that disappears and the app returns back to its original state. So as we talk through all these things, that kind of I just wanted to bring this back up and go back to reinforcing the cycle that we want to get to. Again, as we think about Windows, we want Windows to update, via Windows Update, or if you guys control the updates. We want the apps and the developers to just push the apps, and you should feel good about just taking these app updates. And we want you to have an ability to customize the way you want to customize and control that customization, and not have to get into this packaging paralysis and spend tons and tons of time with packaging and doing all that. So the next thing that always kind of comes up that I just really wanted to address in this session is, what about AppV? Okay, AppV isn't going away. Obviously, we'll eventually want AppV to migrate into MSIX, and our tools all allow you to do that. But AppV will continue to ship throughout calendar year 19. It'll probably ship beyond. Right now, we're just planning through calendar year 19. So it hasn't been set to deprecate yet. It's still there in the client. You can still happily use it. You can convert via the MSIX packaging tool. If you're using AppV5, that functionality is available today in our preview. If you're using AppV46SP3, we don't have support for that in our tool quite yet. That's coming in a future update. But really, you use AppV as an accelerator to MSIX. If you're an AppV shop, everything you're doing there will easily help you move to MSIX. Obviously, if you're not an AppV shop, don't worry about it. You don't need to deploy AppV to use MSIX. It's just I want to make sure folks know that, hey, if you're using it, keep deploying it, keep doing what you're doing, and when you're ready to hop on MSIX, it's there for you, and we're going to make it as seamless as possible for you. So what kind of other things are coming? So this is the fun part that I like to talk about, where there's some key roadmap items that, hey, right now when we're launching MSIX, we didn't quite get to everything we wanted to get to. But trust us, we know a lot of what we want to go do. Some of it we'll ship in our out-of-band releases. A couple of the things we'll have to wait for a Windows update, unfortunately, just because we have to do some client code updates. So out of band, we're going to continue to grow that package support framework library. We're working with folks in our community. I see one guy in the back I know is already writing a PSF, and if I can get my GitHub submission stuff all fixed up, he'll publish it for us. So we're going to keep growing that library. We're hoping the community will chip in more on it too. We'll work with the community to make it great, just to help with moving your apps forward. We are looking to add some level of MSIX support on Windows 7. Now, will I get everything that I talked about today in that? No, because to bring all the container level stuff down, the update would probably be just as big as moving to Windows 10, so that doesn't make sense. But how can I take advantage of the deployment tech on Windows 7? So if I make an MSIX, as long as the app's compatible with Windows 7, I only have to manage one installer. And in Andrew's session, he's actually going to cover a little bit of the Windows 7 stuff, but it's something we're actively looking at. And when I say Windows 7, I really mean pre-Windows 10. So the few folks in here that might have deployed Windows 8.1, don't worry, it'll work with that too. Support for Windows/NT services. It's something we wanted to get to in the 1809 release and just didn't have enough time to get it in there with all the quality. So we'll be adding that in our, what will probably be 1903 release, whatever the next March release is going to be called. So we will add support for Windows services, so you'll be able to go and migrate apps with Windows services to MSIX. This other feature, anyone using AppV, those connection groups, connection sets, really we're going to bring the notion of flexible containers. So I talked about modification packages and apps, but what if you need multiple apps to all kind of operate like they work together? So we're gonna, we're gonna add this feature that's called flexible containers that allow an IT pro to say, hey, I need these set of apps to work like they're a suite, and I'm okay extending the boundary where all these apps kind of work together. So that should be coming down the road in one of our future releases. Richer OS extensibility points, there's a laundry list of things that we just want to make OS integration better. So, adding the start menu items, ability to set custom shortcuts with parameters, things like that. So just get richer in what you could do with the OS today. There's still a few things that, on the outliers that just don't quite work the way we want to. So we want to be able to get as much as we possibly can into MSIX. And then deeper integration with ConfigMan and Intune. Like I said, we do have support available for it, but we haven't let up modification package support quite yet. So we really just want to get into a better model where, the platform and all its richness is exposed through, a couple of our main tools. And we're working closely with that team to create great IT admin experiences around these types of apps. And then one of the other things we're also kind of looking at is, hey, if I have a bunch of apps in either of these, can I just take them out of my console and move them to MSIX? Like, how much work do I actually have to go do? And if you go to Charlotte Avi's session on Thursday, they're going to actually talk about some of our roadmap items on how we might go and automate some of the conversion of the apps that you already have in your catalog. And that's the conversion as a service. So really doing some sort of cloud-based conversion to make it super easy so there's less manual work for you guys to get to MSIX. We can do as much as we can automate it for you. And then lastly, the topic of drivers comes up quite a bit. So one of the things we're looking at in MSIX is not necessarily to allow drivers to be supported in MSIX. In fact, most of the ISVs I've been talking to don't want to deliver the drivers they have to. In fact, I was talking to at least 3 people this week, and they came up and they're like, what about driver support in MSIX? And I was like, okay, my first question is, do you like deploying drivers? And they're like, oh God, no. It's horrible. I have to manage all the reboots and everything, and it's a nasty experience, but I don't have another way to go do it. And I was like, that's great. So what we're looking to do is build out a way that an app can go take a dependency on a driver so that that app will only run and can interact correctly with the driver, but not tie the app and the driver distro together, right? Like, let the driver come from something like Windows Update, publish the app, the driver easily to Windows Update, and then when the app's installed, it can pull the driver down, but it's not necessarily bundled with the app. And then that'll give a lot of agility down the road when you're doing something like a Windows Update to say, hey, when the new version of Windows comes down, grab all the new drivers, the app doesn't need to change, and now I'm not blocked as part of my Windows Update. So it's something we're working with a few, we're starting with a few of the hardware vendors right now, and we're actually doing some proof of concepts and prototyping of this right now, and then we'll expand it out to more of these software drivers or kernel mode services to really give that richer experience in MSIX. So I talked that we're looking a lot about this, and I actually want to show some more stuff that we're kind of doing down the road. So Nona here is actually going to do a really quick demo of some UX blocking updates. So one of the things people talk about is click once quite a bit. And with click once, you can prevent the user from running the app before they get the update. So in our next version of Windows, we'll actually add that support. And Nona has a demo running of some of our in-progress code.
All right. So let's go back to Contoso. Now they want to be able to ship expense report app to their users. These Contoso folks, they want so much. All right, so they have a website, and a user would click to install the application. As you can see, the familiar app installer app kicks in really quickly. The installation is very fast.
So one thing to just point out that you might not have caught really quickly is whenever you're installing an app that will do auto updates, the user will get a quick message on that app installer app informing them, just so they know that, hey, by doing this, the app's going to silently update in the background. Just making sure the users are aware of everything that's happening on their system. Now, in an enterprise world, not a huge thing, but like if you're hosting something externally on a website for lots of people, it'll just let them know that that app might be updated over time.
Yep. So as you can see, the application got installed really quickly. And you might ask, well, what's different here? Let's look at what's going on behind the scenes. And if you notice, we still have the protocol activation as we did before. But this time, we're not linking to our MSIX, we're linking to this .app installer file. And you might ask, what are the contents of that? What is going on here? So let's take a look at it. This is the app installer file. This is a file that you would author, and as you can see, it's very short and very simple. Let's go over the sections that it consists of, and then we'll go over the new things that we're adding. So first we have the location of the actual app installer file and the version of the app installer file. Next we have some basic information about the main application we want to install. For us, this includes the version, publisher, and the location of the application. Now, for the purposes of this demo, my application is hosted locally so that we don't have to rely on the internet here so much.
Are you telling me 30,000 people on the same Wi-Fi is going to bog it down? I don't.
You didn't think it would? All right. And finally, we have our update settings section. Now, in this section, you would specify how you want to update your application. There are updates that can happen completely in the background without your user needing to do anything. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm showing an update that happens on launch. Then you'll notice we can specify the number of hours we want to go by before we check for a new application. This is just so that we can make sure we're not constantly hitting our internet connection, checking for updates. Now, again, for the purposes of this demo, I've set the update checks to happen on every launch, but you can set it on a couple of days or whatever is comfortable for you. Next, we have the show prompt, and I've set that to true, and that will essentially make a UI pop up when there's an update informing the user of the update. And finally, we have the update blocks activation set to true as well. What that's going to happen is it will inform the user that they must take the update before actually launching the application. Now, if you were to set it to false, it'll give the user a choice between taking the update now and launching later, or taking the update later at an opportune time and launching right now. Here I'm demoing requiring the user to take the update, so I've got it set to true. Now, as you noticed when I first installed my application, it's version 1.7, and we're checking for an update. There's not going to be one, so the application will just launch. This is version 1.7. Now, I find out that there's a newer version of my application. So all I need to do is really just change a couple fields in my app installer file. First, I need to specify the new version of the application, change the path to my new version, and of course, change the version of the actual app installer file. And once I save that, the next time I launch my application, we're going to query for updates, and because this file will be synced to the cloud, I'll be able to find out that there's an update, and I will show the user the prompt for the update. As you can see, we're checking for updates again. And we found our updates. We're letting the user know, hey, you have to take the update or you must get out of the app, because that's what I specified in the app installer file. Our user takes the update, and as soon as the update is applied, they'll still be able to launch their application and continue working the way they normally would.
And any second now it should launch. This is the beauty of in-development code.
All right.
Almost, come on. All right, we'll abandon it.
Oh, there it is, there it is.
Oh,
wait for
okay.
it, wait for it.
There we go. See, I just had to give up and then it worked.
Success. All right, we have this nice new search functionality, so we know our updates are flowing. And with that, our users are happy and everything is nice and easy for them. All right, John.
Cool.
Back to you.
Thanks. So that's just, some of the things that we're working on and to show we're just continually making progress. Plus, it's just kind of a fun demo to kind of show off. But again, we're really committed to moving forward with MSIX, really making sure there's no need to write all these custom things to install and really trying to let Windows own that manageability of the app installation and lifecycle, because that's how you get these reliability numbers up. When I talk to folks, about MSI, I constantly hear somewhere in the 80s, 83% success on MSI. And then people, do things like PowerShell App Deploy Toolkit or rewrap these apps to get that success rate up. But by default, when we track our telemetry, we're seeing 99.96% success with MSIX right now. So the reliability numbers are through the roof. And part of that is, obviously eliminating running custom code during installation and making a more declarative, reliable deployment. So in the concept of roadmap stuff, I did want to touch on one more thing. I talked a little bit about Windows 7 support, and I really do want to leave that to Andrew, mostly because he has so much more time to talk about it. But what we're looking at is really building out a framework that can talk about how MSIX could be used down level. And it's something we're aggressively trying to get done. If anybody saw my build presentation, I actually showed a demo of using our cross-plat SDK to extract an app on Windows 7 and get going with that. We've made significant progress since I did that demo that you'll be able to see a little bit later. But when we think about it we think about it as kind of like MSIX core. How do I just do the base packaging and I say deployment here, but it's really extraction of the file. And this is something that we do on something like Windows 7. You don't have the whole richness of everything I talked on the platform, but I can still use MSIX as the installer. And then when you move up to something like Windows 10, you can start taking advantage of what we were calling MSIX native, and we're sure these names will change by then. And this is just taking all the benefits of MSIX core and doing a proper deployment, but maybe not even using the container. So I talked a little bit about in that container continuum, maybe giving you a dial to turn most of the containment off. So that would be kind of like MSIX native. And then getting to the world where it's really just MSIX complete. God, we got to find a better name for that one. But really, it's everything that I've talked about today in the full container dial and all of MSIX. So it's something that we really want to get to and not just think about, hey, wait till you guys all upgrade and in 5 years you can take advantage of this tech. Is we want to start today with it in Windows 10, but find ways for you to be able to use it on the OSs that you've already deployed, and then you might still keep deployed for a couple years. So we're definitely listening to that type of feedback. We understand that we can't just keep building new features and force you guys to upgrade to take advantage of them. So we're actively trying to figure out ways to pull more and more backwards for you, if even in a slightly limited feature set. So from our standpoint, MSIX is the deployment technology moving forward. This is what we'll be investing in, trying to grow and make better. That being said, we're not deprecating any of the functionalities there. It's just we want to keep ramping this up because we believe this is the right way, and where customers, users, IT pros, ISVs are going to get the most benefit, and we're going to bring the reliability and ease of use to our users and make the best experience on our devices. So that being said, there are a couple related sessions. I talked about Andrews quite a bit. Charlotte and Avi have that one on updating your existing config manager apps to MSIX. That's kind of a fun one because it's really getting into the console, looking at what you've authored, and really learning on all the different ways you can move these types of things forward, and then talking a little bit about the future roadmap of MSIX and config man together. And then there's a little bit of a theater session. It's a quick 20-minute session later in the day that's just going through our packaging tool. If you got random Q&A for the packaging tool, it's great to go and check that out. Charlotte and Payment are the two PMs that own the tool. So, if you got feedback on it, those are the people to go bug. Let them know what you want. They should be listening and at least, start considering that type of stuff. Honestly, I haven't heard any bad feedback yet. Sorry, I haven't heard any feedback on changes that were bad. I've heard bad feedback. But we're definitely listening, and, what you guys tell us is the way we want to move forward and make the products better. Also, we have a booth out there. You can come talk to our MS experts. But cooler about this is if you guys actually have an installer or if you can go download one, bring your installer to the booth. We have a bunch of laptops set up, and we'll walk you through converting your installer into a packaging tool. So you saw the demo where I had my installer, but it's kind of an easy installer. I say bring your challenging ones and see if you can stump the pros. We're happy to learn, and we're happy to just get feedback on what's good and what's bad. So you can go meet the team, and there's some free swag they're giving out and everything too. So stop by there. And then lastly, just 2 more additional resources. We actually have a landing page for MSIX. One of the things that we always get feedback on is it's sometimes hard to navigate and find docs. So we actually curated a lot of the documentation. So if you go to aka.ms/MSIX, there's a landing page, and it guides you whether you're an IT pro or a developer hopefully to the right docs. Obviously, we're looking for feedback if that works or not, but at least it's a nice curation to get you the most information. And then lastly, we did launch a tech community a couple months ago, and now that the OS is getting near shipping, it's a great place to just talk, interact, have questions, go do that. There's also an ideas forum, so if you have feature requests or anything, you can go put those in. If folks have used user voice, it's a lot like user voice, it's just in the tech community. People can upvote it, the product team can actually interact with you and say, hey, don't worry, we got it in the backlog, or hey, I'd love to learn more about what you're really asking here. So anything that you guys kind of want, that's a great place that you can go give us some feedback as well. That being said, I'm open for some questions. Just walk up to the mics.
First question is it production ready right now? Can we go away and deploy this on a customer site right now?
Yeah, so is it production ready? Can we deploy it at a customer site? It is with 1809. It's not applicable for 100% of all your apps. So like I talked about, drivers and services are not available to be put over yet. So it's not, you can port your entire catalog over. But yeah, it's ready to go with the 1809 build. And then when we start doing the backport, that'll be a little bit later.
Nice one from over here.
Yeah, it's soon.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Where are you with ISV support? Because one of the issues with any repackaging technology is I repackage an app, an MSI, or I set up the XC, I deploy it, it then breaks, I try and get support, and the vendor says, well, you've repackaged it, you need to install it in the native format, and then come back and speak to me again. So if you can get ISVs to deliver applications natively in MSIX, that's good, because that's one of the things, to my mind, that's held back AppV a little bit.
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. So AppV was held back for so many reasons. I mean, it was developers didn't take it. We limited the SKUs, and we made you pay a lot of money for it.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. So one of the things I kind of talked a little bit about today is we are taking both the developer route and the IT pro route. So I can't talk to a lot of the major folks I'm working with, but we are actively engaging the ISVs, and that's one of the bigger reasons, not just for IT pros to use across all their devices, but the reason we're trying to go back down to Windows 7 is there's no reason not to use MSIX. Yeah. So if we say it's an 1809 only thing, obviously an ISV is going to be like, well, MSI works everywhere. So we want to grow out this platform so that there's no reason not to use MSIX. So we're working with a bunch of ISVs, and we have a whole team engaged on trying to push it forward. But it's great feedback, and it's something we're definitely trying to get moved forward.
Okay, cool, thanks.
So in my environment, we don't really use SCCM as much as we'd like. So what does the command line look like for deploying MSIX?
Oh, the command line you can use is just a PowerShell command line, and it's just add-app package, and then you pass it the MSIX.
Okay, so it's the same as AppX then?
Yeah, in fact, you could use AppX package as well, and then it's the same, because a lot of the fundamentals at that layer are pretty similar. So we modeled that, and then we'll probably grow out add package with more stuff later. And you can also pass it directly to UNC, HTTP, or local file system, so you can script however you want to go with that.
Cool, thank you.
No problem.
What do you think about the idea of repackaging Office 2016 to MSIX?
What do I think about packaging Office 2016 to MSIX? I would tell you that if you ever bought a 10S device, it was already done. And then moving for enterprise, I would say it's a great idea and something that we definitely should be looking at. But 10S actually runs a version in AppX, which is a very constrained subset of what MSIX is, and that's running on 10S devices. So we actually have a version of Office working in that. Cool. Thank you, everyone. If you have any more questions, like I said, at our booth, I'll be there or my team, and we're happy to help answer anything.
Thanks, folks.